much for the very warm introduction. And indeed, struggle is struggle. Our struggle is your struggle. Your struggle is our struggle. One of the reasons that I'm really proud to be here is because this tour is being sponsored in large part by the unions. I'm the product of two trade unionists, and I myself was a member of the union for a number of years before taking a different path in life. And indeed, struggles across the world are very much united. I think it's only when we begin to recognize that this jacket that I'm wearing here today was made by somebody who connects me to them all around the world, and the pants that I'm wearing, the shoes that I'm wearing, are all done by people around the world, that we begin to recognize that struggles indeed are united and people are people, and unless we begin to treat one another in that manner, then we will never be able to be victorious. So I thank you again very much for the very warm introduction. I also just wanted to add to the list of individuals who are boycotting. Yesterday, I was at a meeting of the National Council of the AMWU, and they also passed a resolution boycotting Israeli goods, demanding a consumer boycott of Israeli goods. And I was very happy that that resolution passed unanimously. It's obviously going to be put to the membership, but I was very pleased to see that had passed. What I want to do in my talks today is I'm going to try to take a little bit of a broader picture approach so that we can go through basically what it is that you see and read about in the news, whether it's you're reading the paper or you're listening to ABC or watching ABC or listening to ABC. Because what I want to do is I really want to put what's happening now in Palestine in context, in its proper context, which is a bigger picture. And from there, once I start laying out the bigger picture, I think I'm going to then talk a little bit about the negotiations process, which you hear a lot about today. And from there, take you through to how I think that we collectively, as I said, struggles are united and people are people, and unless we understand the links, take us through to how it is that we collectively can begin to move forward to change the situation in Palestine. But I'm first going to begin with just a little bit of a personal message, which is, I'm really excited to see so many people here on, I guess it's Wednesday evening. I don't quite know what the days are yet. I'm still a little bit jet lagged. And the reason I'm so excited to see so many people here on a Wednesday at night, I know it's cold for you all. It's not cold for me. I'm from Canada, so this is spring for us. So sometimes summer actually. But I'm really delighted to see so many people here because and I'm ashamed to say this, but 10 years ago, I wouldn't have been doing what you're doing. 10 years ago, I would have been sitting at home, perhaps watching TV, reading a book. The last thing that I would have done was come to a lecture on Palestine. I say this with a great deal of shame. So I'm delighted to see that you're here. Now, that all changed for me about 10 years ago at a certain point in my life, which I'll talk about. But before I get to that, as you indicated, Carver, when I'm born to Palestinian parents, but being born to Palestinian parents didn't automatically give me a badge of you're going to be a Palestinian activist. In fact, it was quite the opposite. And I came from my working class parents who were very afraid, having been citizens in the state of Israel and having been persecuted in the state of Israel. My parents were quite afraid of speaking out. They were afraid to talk about what was going on in Palestine. The word Palestine was never mentioned in my home. The word Israel was never mentioned in my home. The word activism was never mentioned in my home. And although my parents were members of trade unions, they very much kept my knowledge of Palestine very, very, very limited because they were afraid that if somehow I knew about Palestine, that things would change for me, and indeed they did. The first time they changed for me was in 1987 when I first visited Palestine, when I actually for the first time saw what it was like to be a Palestinian, to witness what it was like for Palestinians who were both living under Israeli military rule and for Palestinians who were citizens of Israel. As much as we might focus only on the West Bank and on the Gaza Strip as being occupied territories, the struggle of Palestinian citizens of Israel is no different than the struggle of the Palestinians who were living in the occupied territories, and in some cases is in fact worse. So that reality changed for me in 1987, but then there was another reality that happened, which was in 1993. And I don't know if people remember this, but it certainly was life-transforming for me. There was a very famous handshake on the White House lawn of late President Arafat, the late Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and President Clinton. And the reason that this was such an important period in my life was I was at a new phase in my life. I was attending law school. But more importantly, I used the excuse of seeing this handshake to say to myself, peace is on the way. I don't need to worry about Palestine any longer. It's all going to come together. I can now check out. And so, as I said, 10 years ago, I wouldn't be doing what you were doing here. I would have been watching television in my house. I'm not braving the cold in any way. Because I actually believed that the negotiations process was going to lead to freedom for the Palestinians, for my people. And that I didn't need to worry about Palestine any longer. It was all suddenly going to magically disappear with Oslo and with the negotiations process. I got a very rude awakening in the year 2000. And at the time, I was living in California. And when I was living in California, I had an Israeli friend. My Israeli friend and I had vowed that we were never going to talk about politics, we were never going to talk about religion, and we had a very good friendship because we talked about books, and we talked about the weather, we talked about music, but we never spoke about the big elephant that was in the room, which was Palestine. That all came to a change one day during the Camp David negotiations. And again, I don't know if anybody recalls this, but I do quite recall it. At the time, it was the tail end of the negotiations. The negotiation process had failed. As many commentators and critics had said it would fail, but I wasn't paying attention. And instead, what happened was at this press conference, the U.S. President Clinton stood before this press conference and indicated how forthcoming, they weren't using the terms generous offer, that ended up coming up later in life, how forthcoming the Israeli Prime Minister had been, and how welcoming the Israeli Prime Minister had been, and how much he had moved. And my friend turned to me and said to me, Diana, what's wrong with you people? I was a little bit stunned. And I said, what do you mean what's wrong with us? He said, what's wrong with the Palestinians? I said, well, what do you mean what's wrong with the Palestinians? I was a little bit shocked because we weren't supposed to be talking about politics, but anyway. And he said, aren't you watching TV? Can't you see what's happening? The American president has just indicated how forthcoming Barack has been, and you people just simply seek the destruction of the state of Israel. Now, this was coming from a left-wing Israeli, by the way. And I said, whoa, let's go take it back a step. What do you mean? And he said, listen, aren't you listening to what they're saying? They're talking about this huge offer, large areas of land of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And I said, okay, well, let's take it one by one. I said, so